Hi, my name is Steve Murphy. This is the Insider Exclusive, and today we bring you the real stories behind the headlines. We are featuring Tom Mesereau, one of America's most celebrated criminal defense attorneys. You know him from the Michael Jackson case, so stay tuned because this is going to be a great interview.
Law school and law practice dehumanizes lawyers. It almost isolates them from ordinary people. We all grow up prejudiced. We have to remind ourselves about it every day and do what we can to overcome it. Can you rise above what you've read and look at the evidence and follow the law? And I kept emphasizing that, and they did it.
And now, our honored guest on our show, Tom Mesereau. Welcome to our show, Tom.
Well, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Tom is one of America's most celebrated criminal defense attorneys. He handles civil cases too, though, don't you?
Yes.
And he's been involved with many cases. You've seen him in the news, those famous locks. He got Michael Jackson acquitted. He's represented Mike Tyson, Robert Blake, and a number of other celebrities and non-celebrities, correct?
That's correct.
One of the things that a lot of people ask me, and I'm going to address the questions to you, is what makes a great trial lawyer?
Well, first of all, you have to reach way beyond what happened to you in law school. Because in law school, everything's an intellectual exercise. And in many ways, law school and law practice dehumanizes lawyers. It almost isolates them from ordinary people. But in a courtroom, you have to be willing to speak and able to understand non-lawyers, ordinary people, people who get up every morning and go through life in a normal, common sense way. And many lawyers don't have that. I think if you like people, if you're interested in people, if you want to be around people, you have an advantage and a like for people.
A good example of what you're talking about is the O.J. case. Johnny Cochran related to the people, didn't he?
He sure did, and if you read his first book, which has a chapter on the case, he says, in my closing argument, I didn't just try to reach people intellectually, I wanted to reach their hearts.
Right.
He knew, better than any lawyer I've ever seen, what people were all about, because he loved people, and he loved being around people, and he understood them.
You wrote an article about that, about Johnny Cochran after he passed on.
I did.
And one of the statements that really struck out to me was the definition of a character. In other words, when you're in that courtroom and you're on that stage, what you're made of really is conveyed to that jury, doesn't it?
Especially in a long trial. First of all, jurors in a criminal case know what they're being asked to do. They're being asked to render a decision that could destroy a person's life and the life of the people that person knows, his family, his friends. They also see a victim's family around, and they know they could affect their lives, and they take their job very seriously. Because of that, I think jurors in a criminal trial are at their most intuitive, their most instinctive. They really, really are using every faculty they have to do what's right. And especially in a long trial, I think they see through what's going on in a courtroom and they get to know who the lawyer really is.
Do you, when you address a jury, do you tell them that it is their responsibility to uphold the Constitution, to rise above the media circus that may surround a trial?
Well, I do that in different ways. First of all, if it's a case like Michael Jackson, when you're questioning potential jurors early in the case, I kept mentioning problems with the media. Did they read newspapers like the National Enquirer? Did they read particular magazines? Did they watch particular shows?
Almost everybody has, though.
And I also asked them, I almost challenged them, can you rise above what you've read and look at the evidence and follow the law? And I kept emphasizing that, and they did it.
Do you expect a person to tell you the truth when you ask that question?
I expect most to. There are some people who are desperate to get on jurors, and you have to intuit who they are as best you can in the limited time you have. But some of my colleagues think I'm a little naive. I think most people who want to be on jurors really want to independently and intelligently and courageously do what's right.
Because that's probably one of the most important things that they ever done in their life, isn't it?
Absolutely. You have a life in your hands.
Right. And the Michael Jackson case in particular, how many jurors did you actually go through to pick that jury?
It was picked very quickly. Most people thought we'd spend a month trying to pick a jury, and it was almost picked in a day or two.
Okay.
And the judge did severely limit the time we had to question potential jurors to 20 minutes per person. And I had to be very focused and very clear and quick on what the principal questions I was going to ask were. And I emphasize problems with the media, problems with not judging someone before they've had their day in court,
right.
I asked about children lying. I asked about the possibility of parents asking their children to lie or influencing them to lie. I very quickly got to the core of what I thought was important.
Do you find, and speaking of children lying or maybe having their memory, let's say, massaged by an adult like their parent, do you find that a lot of kids automatically tell the truth, or what do you usually find generally?
I find both. You know, children are very spontaneous,
Right.
but children can be influenced to do what's right or what's wrong, depending on who's influencing them.
Right.
And in this particular case, we sought to prove that there was a history of these children lying at the request and under the influence of both parents. And I think we proved it pretty convincingly.
Is there a time in a trial when you hear evidence where, you know, kids have been influenced by the parents, there's been, let's say, improper activity by the prosecution? Is there a time when the judge says, I've had enough of this?
Rarely.
Rarely.
I think judges like to let jurors decide. They believe in our jury system. It's rare that a judge just kicks a case out of court,
Right.
although I have had it happen. It wasn't a case involving children. It was a securities fraud case.
Right.
After 11 weeks, a judge, a very experienced judge, looked at me and said, I've never done this before, but I'm throwing this case out. I'm not letting it get to the jury in the interest of justice.
Right.
But rarely does that happen.
Any great trial lawyer has to be prepared, don't they?
You have to be prepared, and you also have to be ready to react, because unexpected things happen in every single trial. It's a major cardinal rule of this profession that things are going to happen that you don't anticipate. Witnesses you think are going to be good are going to falter. Witnesses you think are going to be bad are going to be good. All sorts of unexpected things happen, and you have to be ready for it.
You rely on your preparation on a lot of investigators, correct?
Absolutely. Investigation is key, particularly in a criminal case where the state or the
Right.
federal government is throwing legions of resources against you.
And you had in the Michael Jackson case, you had legions of resources thrown against Michael Jackson, didn't you?
I've never seen anything like it. One of the many raids on his residence involved over 70 sheriffs. And I'm amused by the fact that the prosecutor is now saying we outspent them, which is utterly ridiculous. I had a
It's
couple
the taxpayers' money.
well, I had a couple of investigators. They
Right.
had probably over 100.
Yeah.
It wasn't even close.
Is there something, you know, inside a trial, like when you're dealing with Michael Jackson or any of the cases, there is always something the public never hears about that you can talk about afterwards. What are some of those facts?
Well, there are many things in that
Yeah.
case. I could talk forever about things that
just a
happen.
few of them.
Well, I think the problem of constantly having to fend off mediocrities, starstruck wannabes, lawyers who would say or do anything to get involved in the case because
Right.
they wanted the press, they wanted to be on stage, to constantly be fending these people off while you were doing your own preparation and while you were trying to fight the other side was a major distraction and a major difficulty in the case. I was constantly dealing with it. I didn't want to. I wanted to just focus on beating the prosecution, but I kept hearing about lawyers trying to get involved, lawyers showing up in court saying they were involved, and I would look
How
at
would
them
they
and say,
be involved?
because somehow they would get to somebody who knew Michael Jackson
Right.
and try and convince them that they belonged in the case, that they had the strategy that would get it dismissed. It was ridiculous, but
Really?
they kept showing up. Yeah.
In a lot of your cases, race is an issue,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
You wrote an article about addressing race to the jury as soon as possible, correct?
Yes.
There are assumptions you wrote in that article. What are those assumptions that you'll share with us?
Well, basically, I was talking about black people and white people, and I
Yes.
was talking about cases which appear to have white prejudice directed towards black people.
Yes.
And I said, look, you know, minority communities, particularly the black community, has been, people have been raised with a sense of community.
Yes.
They've had to have a sense of community to survive, to protect themselves. But white people haven't had that problem. We've always been the majority in America, so many of us don't grow up with a sense of community because we didn't have to.
Right.
I also wanted to mention the fact that I think racism exists at both a subconscious and a conscious level.
In everybody.
Yes, many people look in the mirror and say, I'm not racist, I'm
Right.
not prejudiced.
Right.
They don't realize the extent to which they do devalue people they see different from themselves. And sometimes you have to remind them of that in a very, very respectful way, so they will be conscious of it, because we all have subconscious prejudices that we're not even aware of. And I also mentioned that all of us grow up with some kind of prejudice. People who say, I have no prejudice, I've never been exposed to it, are not telling the truth. We all grow up prejudiced. We have to remind ourselves about it every day and do what we can to overcome it.
Do you find when you're addressing the jurors this way, that they listen to you and that they rise above that?
I have found that, yes. I think that people don't want to be prejudiced. They don't want to be biased. They want to treat others as they like themselves to be treated. Sometimes you have to very respectfully and in a very humane way let them know they have to be careful, because there is this human tendency to devalue others you see as different from you.
Right. I am sure that many lawyers are going to be watching this show. You're one of the finest. In fact, to me, you're the Clarence Darrow of the 21st century.
Well, thank you.
Cross-examination. When you cross-examine someone, what techniques do you use to effectively dismantle their testimony?
It depends on the witness and it depends on the issues.
Going back to the Michael Jackson case,
Yes.
their star witness.
Well, they had a number of so-called star witnesses, particularly in this family of accusers. There was the young accuser who was claiming he was molested. And you have to be very careful with a child witness, that you don't look like a bully.
Right.
And you don't generate sympathy for that child witness. In this particular case, I went against the grain. I thought this young man was mature way beyond his years. I thought he was enjoying being on stage. He had done acting training. And I thought that he was far more seasoned than he wanted the jury to think. And I went after him right away. I took some risks. I got very aggressive. I wanted to show the other side of him, and I think I was effective at doing that. I think he changed his demeanor very quickly when he was attacked. I think he didn't know what to say about another case where I thought we proved lies had been told at the behest of the parents.
You're talking about the J.C. Penney case?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. That was a case where I think we proved that this family had made claims against J.C. Penney guards for sexual harassment and for assault that were not true. And I decided to just go right after this kid.
Yeah.
Now, his sister and his brother testified. I didn't go after them as hard and as quickly as I did this accuser, but I did show a lot of inconsistencies and problems with their testimony. And what was interesting was everyone in this family said they had never discussed the case with each other, which I think right away made the jury wonder, are they telling the truth?
Yeah, are they living under the same roof, basically?
That's correct. That's correct.
Celebrity justice. A lot of people say that rich people can have a different sort of system. You know, they can buy what they want, the outcome. Is that true?
It is absolutely untrue. Celebrities have resources thrown at them that nobody else faces. In the Robert Blake case, this was the largest investigation in the history of Los Angeles County, even larger than the O.J. Simpson case. Hundreds of thousands of documents, police going all over the country, interviewing almost anyone they could find associated with Mr. Blake.
Why is that? Because they want to win?
Because they want to win. It's high profile. Everybody wants to win before the public. And in Michael Jackson, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, you had 2 grand juries in the early 90s. You had a grand jury in our case. You had a prosecutor himself personally flying out of the country to at least 2 countries that I know of, Australia and Canada, looking for witnesses. You had a website at the Sheriff's Department looking for witnesses. More resources were thrown at Michael Jackson than any serial killer I've ever heard of.
What about the lawyers sometimes who get involved with these celebrity cases? Sometimes they rise above the actual client in terms of getting media spin on them, right?
Well, first of all, you're dealing with a celebrity that comes from a different world.
Okay.
And celebrities, they're familiar with the world of entertainment, television, the camera, the studio. This is a totally different world from the courtroom. What happens in courtrooms is so different, but they don't know that. With all the TV shows about trials and about the legal system, they assume that they're interchangeable. They're really not. And what happens in courtrooms is so different. You have to let the client know that you don't know this world. You may think you do, but you don't. You have to listen to my direction. You have to trust that I know the system I'm working in. And it's very difficult sometimes to get celebrity clients to realize that they don't control the situation the way they'd like to be able to and the way they're used to.
Yeah, a good example is that before I think you came into the Michael Jackson case, he was dancing on the top of a van, correct?
Well, yes. Before I came...
What kind of conversation did you have with him to say you can't do this?
Well, I don't want to go into conversations with the client, but I will say this. I was appalled at the public relations that preceded me in Jackson.
Yes.
There'd been a big party at Neverland for the media. That was the first day he appeared in court. He had appeared late. He got on top of an SUV. The press covered a big meeting at the Beverly Hills Hotel of his legal and financial staff that I thought was, highly inappropriate. And I just did not like the way everybody seemed to be profiting at his expense to try and be stars themselves.
Right.
I tried to tone everything down. I supported the judge's gag order. I didn't want cameras in the courtroom. I supported court sealing of salacious pleadings so the media wouldn't start reading court papers and having a field day.
Right.
I really felt that there were 13 people that were primarily important, the judge and 12 jurors. They were far more important than the worldwide media, far more important than the television cameras and the reporters. They were the ones you were going to win or lose with, nobody else.
Currently, there is a proposal in the Supreme Court to bring cameras into the Supreme Court. Many of the justices don't want this. Do you ever see a time or a place where that would be appropriate?
Well, I actually supported cameras in the Robert Blake preliminary hearing, which was a 3-week preliminary hearing. It was not in front of a jury, it was in front of a judge. And I thought that cameras would benefit us as we dismantle the prosecution's evidence, which we were successful at doing.
Right.
In the Michael Jackson case, I said keep cameras out.
Right.
I think it's going to affect everybody in a possibly negative way. I didn't want witnesses turning on TV and seeing what other witnesses had said before they came to testify. And I just felt that this case called for subduing the publicity as opposed to encouraging it. So it really depends on the case, but I am concerned about cameras, how it's affecting people.
Being involved with a number of celebrity cases, how do you keep grounded so that, you know, the celebrityness doesn't overtake you?
You know, it's almost like an athletic event. You know, you've got an opponent on the other side. You personally don't hate that opponent, but you psych yourself up in a way to demonize them temporarily while you try to win.
Okay.
In the Jackson case, every day I woke up and said to myself, the media is against you. They're trying to distort what's going on in the courtroom. They want to see a conviction because it'll mean more stories, you know, more salacious movies and shows about the rise and fall of Michael Jackson.
Right.
And I really took the attitude, they're not your friends. They're not really out there to help you. Avoid them. They're trying to corrupt you. They would scream at me to try and get a reaction, hoping I would wave and smile and do something that focused attention on myself. And I tried my best to avoid that. I didn't want the lawyers around me waving or looking like they were having a good time. We meant business. And I must say my two co-counsels, Susan Yu and Bob Sanger, had the same attitude. We got out of our cars. We didn't wave at anybody. We meant business.
You do a lot of volunteer work in the community for people who can't afford lawyers, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I opened a free legal clinic for the poor at Brookins AME Church in
Right here in
South
Los
Central Los Angeles, which is going very well. Lawyers volunteer their time, law students volunteer their time. We have judges and law professors and lawyers speaking about various legal specialties that will help people. And we're also organizing events to bring people to the clinic so they know what resources are available for them. I also do at least one capital case in the Deep South free of charge every year.
That is, you've opened an office down in, or you're going to open an office in Birmingham, Alabama?
In Birmingham I am with my dear friend Charles Salvaggio, who's a great criminal defense lawyer in Birmingham, and he's the one I try capital cases with.
Now, you just tried a number of cases down there over the last couple of years, but one of them involved somebody who was supposedly beat their child to death or something?
That was the first trial I had in the state of Alabama. It was a very high-profile death penalty case. A young woman was facing the death penalty for allegedly beating her infant child to death. It was a very tragic case, very unfavorable press towards our client. We acquitted her of capital murder and murder. She was convicted of manslaughter.
How do you pick your cases?
I have a meeting with two dear friends of mine, Charles Salvaggio and Wilson Myers, my dear friends and professional colleagues in Birmingham, and we decide what cases I should come down and do for free.
What's your criteria, though?
Injustice, particularly if I see it. The possibility of injustice could come in a variety of ways. It could be someone who's completely innocent.
Right.
It could be someone who's been overcharged. It could be someone they're throwing resources against, which I think are very out of character for a case like this. We just had a capital murder case dismissed on the day of trial, I'm happy to say, a month ago. A young man who spent a year in jail for something he didn't do. We had I tried a very high-profile capital murder case in Birmingham. It was a homeless black man charged with killing a beautiful white girl a few years back. The publicity was terrible. He was acquitted. He had not done this at all. And we just pick and choose what we think would be appropriate.
Are there places, like in Birmingham right now, you used to be, if you got in trouble and you were African American, you would say, call my lawyer, Johnny Cochran. Are there places now where they say the same thing about you? Call Tom Mesereau.
They may be. I'm not sure. I get a lot of calls.
You get a lot of calls.
I do.
You get letters from people who are incarcerated?
All over the country.
And do you read these letters?
I read as many as I can. Some of them I don't have time to. After the Jackson verdict, I was deluged with hundreds of calls every day, letters coming in every day. People are sending me boxes of files. I can't get to all of these things. I just do my best.
Well, you're doing a remarkable thing. The one thing we never hear about is when you're dealing with a client's been indicted, they've been arrested. It's pretty terrible for them.
Horrible. Absolutely horrible.
Can you share with us a little bit about what goes through the average person's mind who's never been in the criminal justice system, is accused of a gross murder or some terrible crime? What do you say to them? How do you calm them down? And after you talk to them, you know, what do you have to do to maintain their kind of sanity?
Well, your question is a general one, and of course every individual is specific, and the facts of every case are specific. But I try to tell people, look, this system is not perfect. It's the best system in the world, but it makes a lot of mistakes. It's far from perfect. What happens in a courtroom is not reality. It's a recreation of reality. And you have a right to a very, very fine defense. All of us do, whoever you are, rich, poor, whatever. And I assure them that although I can't guarantee any result, I do take my job very seriously. I am experienced. And I let them know that they're in good hands, and they need to take things one day at a time. Don't think beyond the day. You're in a period of crisis. We all have crises in our life, whether it's health, whether it's financial, whether it's legal, whatever it is. None of us walk through unscathed, and we're on your side. And I do my best to comfort the person. Some people take it different ways. Unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues will say things they shouldn't say to people. They'll guarantee results. They'll, to get the client, will say things that I think are unethical and inappropriate. I won't say any of those things. Sometimes people actually get mad at me because I won't make guarantees that other lawyers will make.
How can you make guarantees?
I can't, and I won't.
You know, you haven't even met the jury. You don't know where the case is going to be tried.
Well, there are lawyers that will guarantee a dismissal, that will guarantee a result, that will say almost anything to get their money in their pocket. And when someone comes to me and tells me what another lawyer has said by way of guarantee, I always tell them, why don't you get it in writing? They never can. But I will not make those guarantees.
I interviewed F. Lee Bailey a few days ago, and I said to him, if you had to do it all over again, would you pick the practice of criminal law as your practice area? You know what his answer was?
No.
No. So my question to you is, do you enjoy what you're doing, number one, and would you pick the same practice? Because you originally started out as a corporate lawyer, didn't you?
Well, I started out in a big civil law firm that represented corporations. You're absolutely right. I did work for a corporation for a while as assistant to the president, in which I was supervising lawyers around the country. I feel very blessed to be a criminal defense lawyer and a civil rights lawyer. I would absolutely do it again. I love what I do. Every day is not a picnic. You get tired of the jails and the pressure sometimes, but I think I'm very blessed to be a criminal lawyer, and I definitely would do it again.
Civil rights cases, what are some of the ones you've been involved with?
I've been involved primarily in some criminal cases that I thought had a strong civil rights issue involved. Many years ago, I defended a prominent black city councilwoman in Los Angeles who had become very controversial, who was the target of federal investigators who admitted working on her for a year to try and get her to take a bribe. They had actually had retained a black undercover agent who became her boyfriend, who became her campaign manager, who made her think...
Is this entrapment or
what?
Who
made her think that she was now an executive with a business corporation, who traveled to Mexico with her.
No kidding.
They were tape recording every politician in the city of Compton, and I thought they went so overboard in their tactics that I wanted to expose them. And I took the case free. It involved over 600 surveillance tapes, 50 boxes of documents, a 3-month trial. I almost went broke doing it, but I did it on principle, and I'm very happy I did.
Well, I'm glad. I'm sure she is too, isn't she?
Yeah, she's a good friend of mine.
Yeah. What are some of the cases that you're working on now?
Right now I'm in a case before the Medical Board of California representing a physician. This is not a pro bono case. He's had some accusations filed against him. I have a murder case next month that I'm doing free of charge. Young African-American girl who's been charged with murder, been sitting in jail for over 3 years.
Really?
For something
Where,
I don't
in LA?
believe in Los Angeles, for something I don't believe she did.
Okay.
Doing that for free. Then I have another free capital murder trial in Alabama at the end of April. I have one set in Greene County, Alabama, which is one of the poorest counties in America, for June. That was supposed to go to trial last June, but was continued. And I also have some other cases set for trial in the fall that are paying cases. I don't just do free cases.
You can't just
I have to make a living too. But I also I work at our free clinic, speak there on occasion. I also counsel people.
Do they have a telephone number or some? How can people get a hold of?
It's at Brookins, Brookins,
yes,
AME Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church in Los Angeles. It's on Gramercy Place. It's near 48th and Western. And the clinic meets at least 2 Saturday mornings a month. In fact, it's meeting today. We have a lawyer talking about health care issues for poor people. And we'd love to have anyone come by who would like to see what goes on and maybe would like to donate their time.
Do a lot of people in the community know about it?
Yes, they do. It gets a lot of publicity in the black press in Los Angeles. The Sentinel newspaper, which is the oldest black newspaper in Los Angeles, constantly talks about the clinic.
That's published in Inglewood, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
You've received a number of awards for all the work you've done, haven't you?
I have.
From the mayor, correct?
Mayor Villaraigosa has given me a nice award for my work on behalf of city residents who are unpopular. He's been very vocal about it. I did receive an award from Supervisor Burke for my work on behalf of underprivileged people. I was honored in Washington, D.C. last year. The U.S. Dream Academy, which is a nonprofit organization that helps children of parents who are incarcerated, gave me an award with Senator Hillary Clinton for work with kids, and I've gotten a number of awards like that.
So question, who are you voting for president?
I'm not saying, because frankly at the moment I don't know.
Oh, okay. I mean, you met Hillary Clinton, right?
I did. She was very, very personable and very nice, very impressive.
The case, I want to ask you about the case that you're going to be handling for the girl that's in jail for 3 years. How did that case come to your attention?
Her mother called me for a couple of years, and I was wrapped up in Blake, I was wrapped up in Michael Jackson, and I just
called you for years.
Kept calling me for a couple of years.
So persistence pays off.
Yeah, it did in this case.
Because I remember the case that you had representing the gangbanger, right? Apparently he allegedly shot someone in broad daylight in an intersection.
Yes, that was a murder case.
And his family called you persistently, didn't they?
They called me persistently, and at first I said no because they didn't have any money. I could not afford to do the case. I had just done a bunch of pro bono cases. I had to make a living. They kept calling and begging me to just take a look at the case. I did, and I didn't like what I saw the police doing in the case. I took it, and he was acquitted.
Wow, that is great. I want to thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, thank you for including me.
It has been an honor. You know, I see you as Clarence Darrow, I see you as William Kunstler, you know, and people like you. We need more people like you.
Well, thank you very much.
Because of your reputation and the things that you have done, do you have a lot of lawyers who want to follow in your footsteps? In other words, volunteer their time and take cases on free when they see outrageous conduct, either on behalf of law enforcement or whatever?
Well, yes and no. A lot of lawyers are greedy, and I speak at law schools and bar associations all the time about finding satisfaction in the profession.
Right.
And I tell lawyers and law students, don't just volunteer your time for the poor person who needs it. Do it for yourself.
Right.
It enriches your soul. It makes you feel like you're making a difference, and it makes you feel like a better person.
Are you a religious person?
Yes, I'm a very spiritual person.
Are you?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, thanks for being with us again, Tom.
Thank you very much,
Steve.
Steve.
Have you back again.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed listening to one of America's greatest criminal defense attorneys. If you need him, you know how to get a hold of him. We'll be back with you next week.